An executive meeting was held on February 1st, 2018, and an executive meeting will be held today, February 20th, 2018, to review matters that are by statute including completed investigation for the purpose of issuing a final adjudication, confidential opinion, and administration matters. Okay, with that, we'll do opinion. And do we have someone here?
We do.
Yes.
We have Ms. Madeline Kaplan here.
Okay, you may begin, Ms. Madeline, with your presentation.
Did you want Mr. Corrigan to present first, and then her?
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, Mike.
Okay. The facts pertaining to this advisory request are as follows. The requester is Ellen Madelman Kaplan, Chief Integrity Officer with the Office of the Mayor of the City of Philadelphia. Ms. Madelman Kaplan requests an advisory on behalf of the Honorable James F. Kenney, the Mayor of the City of Philadelphia. Factually, since 2001, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has been in control of the School District of Philadelphia, which I shall refer to hereinafter as the school district. Steps have recently been taken to reestablish the Board of Education of the School District of Philadelphia, which I shall refer to as the Board of Education. The powers and duties of the Board of Education are set forth in the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter. The Board of Education consists of 9 members appointed by the mayor. Pursuant to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter, whenever a vacancy occurs in the Board of Education, the city mayor appoints and convenes a 13-member educational nominating panel, which submits to the city mayor a list containing 3 names of qualified persons for every position on the Board of Education that is to be filled. If the mayor so desires, the educational nominating panel will submit an additional list containing 3 names for each position to be filled. The mayor must make appointments to the Board of Education from those lists. The relevant portions of the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter have been provided to all of the commissioners. Mayor Kenney has appointed a 13-member educational nominating panel to recommend to him nominees for his consideration for appointment to the Board of Education. Because there is a full complement of 9 seats to be filled on the Board of Education, the educational nominating panel will initially send Mayor Kenney a list containing 27 names for his consideration. If Mayor Kenney so desires, the educational nominating panel will send him a second list with 27 more names. Ms. Madelman Kaplan asks whether members of the educational nominating panel and members of the Board of Education would be subject to the restrictions and requirements of the Ethics Act. Ms. Madelman Kaplan further asks whether individuals nominated by the educational nominating panel for potential service on the Board of Education would be considered nominees for purposes of filing financial interest statements, statements of financial interest pursuant to the Ethics Act. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I think it would be appropriate if any interested party would like to speak on this matter, and I think Ms. Madelman Kaplan is there.
Thank you, Mr. Corrigan. Mrs. Madelman, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm Ellen Madelman Kaplan. I'm the Chief Integrity Officer for Mayor Kenney, with jurisdiction over the executive branch of government in Philadelphia. On behalf of the mayor, we are very grateful to the commission for convening this public hearing because of the urgency of the issues, and again, also appreciate the opportunity to address the members of the commission. I think Mr. Corrigan did a very good job in summarizing what the issues are. I did want to tell the commission exactly what the timeline is. The educational nominating panel has been meeting over the last several weeks to look at some, since the School Reform Commission will be out of existence by July, all 9 seats on the Board of Education need to be filled. 3 names are to be given for each of the 9 vacancies, so it's a total of 27 names. Sometime next week, we're not quite sure of the day. As of my meeting this morning, there will be a public hearing where the names of 27 people and potentially some alternates will be named publicly. And the mayor has, as Mr. Corrigan said, within 10 days, if he wants to see additional names, he needs to ask for them. And he must make a decision on the 9 seats, who will occupy the 9 seats on the Board of Education within 20 days. So it's a very short timetable. And I can tell you that an orientation session for new Board of Education members is being planned now for the end of March. I think it's March 24th, and we reached out to ask the State Ethics Commission for training in the event this commission determines that the Board of Education indeed is subject to the provisions of the State Ethics Act. The first request, which I sent a few weeks ago, had to do with the application of the Ethics Act to members both of the Board of Education and to the Educational Nominating Panel. And I did send to the Commission an opinion written by the Philadelphia Board of Ethics, where I asked the same question about the application of the city's ethics rules to members of those 2 entities. Then the more urgent question comes up in terms of filing of financial disclosure statements, which most of us in city government do file by May 1st, whether we file the mayor's form, the city's form, the state's form, or all 3 or 2 of the 3. So the question is, if in fact members of the Board of Education are subject to the State Ethics Act, when would they be required to file the financial disclosure statements? The provision that we are concerned about in the State Ethics Act is Section 1104C, which has to do with the requirements for filing for state-level nominees. And what the law department, which I asked to do legal research on this, has determined is that they're not, these 27 people are not nominees in the traditional sense of the word. 18 of the 27 people will in fact never sit on the Board of Education. Only 9 people will. And if another 27 names are put forward, it's at 38 will not have a seat on the Board of Education. So I think the concern is twofold. One is the legal requirements that these 27 people are not nominees in the traditional understanding of what a nominee is. They're not going before anybody else for appointment. The mayor will choose those 9 people. And I would just say parenthetically that there is a pending amendment in City Council to the Home Rule Charter that would give our City Council confirmation power over Board of Education members in the future. If all goes as Council would like, that will be on the ballot in May, assuming that there is, given some of the other issues, a ballot in May. So, but they do not have confirmation power right now. So These 9 members will serve until the end of Mayor Kenny's first term, which is the beginning of January 2020. So nobody has staggered terms. They all would have a full term just till the end of the mayor's first term, at which point my assumption is if the ballot question passes, the next set of nominees would have to go in front of City Council for confirmation, but that's not the case at this moment. So there's our legal concern that people whose names are being given to the mayor are recommendations. They're not nominees under the State Ethics Act, but that's obviously a determination for this commission. And our second argument really has to do with the practicality of requiring 27 people, 18 of whom are not going to sit on the Board of Education, to submit financial disclosure statements. And it would certainly be our strong preference to have members of the Board of Education submit their financial disclosure statements by May 1st, because those who are going to not occupy those seats on the Board of Education will in fact be named by them.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question or two?
Yes.
Thank you. Because the whole thing you just went through about the pending amendment is not at all mentioned in your letter, so it's a bit of a surprise. I don't recall seeing that mentioned in your letter, at least.
It was just introduced this past Thursday.
Okay. So just so the commissioners are clear, that will be on the ballot for May of this year. If it's passed, it would take effect with the January 2020 new appointments.
Correct. Or if anybody comes off within the mayor's first term, there's always the chance that of the 9 who are appointed, one person or another, for whatever reason, can come off the Board of Education. So this educational nominating panel will kind of go into hibernation, for want of a better word, until they have to come, there are other vacancies to fill. But the next full set of vacancies will happen in the beginning of whoever is the mayor's in January 2020.
But it would seem that for purposes of today's decision, if you're able to reach a decision today, the commission is just to focus on the way things are today, because we don't know if that will pass anyway.
That's correct. I mentioned it only, and it has not even been scheduled for a hearing that I know of. It was just introduced on Thursday.
Okay.
And if it does pass, the voters do approve the proposed constitution, the charter amendment, then we submit that it would fit more easily into the definition under 1104C, but that's just not the case right now. Right now we're dealing with no confirmation. It's just mayoral appointment based on the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Could I ask a question too, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Could you tell me, Ms. Madeline Kappa, prior to the School Reform Commission, prior to 2001, I guess it was, what was done?
There was an educational nominating panel and selection by the mayor, as it is in right now outlined in the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on the question. Did they comply with our Ethics Act and file statements of financial interest?
I do not know the answer to that. My assumption is that they did. I know that certainly members of the School Reform Commission over the last 15 years did file state financial disclosure statements.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I also ask a question? I have a question as well.
Yes, Mr. Paul.
No, it's Ms. Sims, actually.
It's who?
Ms. Sims.
Okay.
Just Ms. Madeline Kaplan, do you have a sense of whether or not the members of the nominating the potential nominees, so the members who could potentially be on the board, so the 27 individuals, have they been apprised that they could potentially have to fill out the statement of financial information?
Yes, there was a public meeting of the educational nominating panel a number of weeks ago, so that the administration could outline what the process was, and both I and Maya Nyack, who is the general counsel for the Philadelphia Board of Ethics, gave a presentation during which we told them, if you are chosen as members, you will have to file financial disclosure statements.
No, well, have they been apprised that not only if they're chosen as members, but if they're potentially nominated? So then all of the nominees, have they been alerted that this may be an issue that they may have to file? So for the 18 people of the 27, of the initial 27 that would be set forth for the mayor's selection, that all 27, have they been apprised that this
No, they have
affect
not.
them?
No, they have not. But
Okay.
obviously, whatever the decision is of this ethics commission, we will alert them. We didn't discuss whether to alert everybody. The people who are among the 27, they don't know they're among the 27. I don't even know
Just yet.
who they are.
Okay.
At this point, roughly 80 people have been interviewed, and so they know they're in roughly the finals, but the 27 names have not been made public.
Okay.
Nor have anybody who was interviewed been told that they are going to be among the 27.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Yes. You know what? Could you identify yourself before you speak from now on? Okay, who's this?
this is Commissioner Galloway. Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sure.
Hi, Ms.
Maybe get-
Oh, thank you. Ms. Malakaplan, I wanted to go back to a point that you made in your initial discussion about budget vote there being a public hearing. My question for you is, prior to that, where you described it as the names will be formally announced of the 27 that will be submitted to the mayor, will there be an opportunity for the 80-some odd folks that you've gotten it down to, will there be an opportunity for any of those people to withdraw their names for any reason, be it because they're now considered nominees and subject to the State Ethics Commission, or State Ethics Act, or otherwise?
There certainly could be an opportunity. What is going to happen, or but again, the date is not set in stone, but it's sometime next week. The plan is to make those names public. After that, those people will have to undergo a background check by the Office of the Inspector General. They're going to have their conflict statement, which we've asked them to file, looked at by my office and other people in the mayor's office. So it may be that some of those people will be taken off the list because of what is learned during the background checks, or they themselves might, for whatever reason, determine that they don't want to sit on the Board of Education. I think it's fair to say that once the names are released, there's probably going to be a fair amount of public comment. Why is that person on the list, and why isn't somebody representing charter schools? I'm making that up because, again, I don't know what the list is. So I think that there are a lot of constituencies that are likely to have something to say publicly about the names on the list. So there may be some attrition based on that.
Mr. Chairman, Robin Hiddey with one more question, if I may.
Sure.
So wait, they're doing background checks on all 27, did you say? On how many?
Potentially on 27. They're trying to whittle down
Whittle it
the
down.
list to see if there's some way it cannot be 27, because the Office of the Inspector General is a pretty time-consuming process.
But potentially
But
27.
potentially up to 27.
And I guess my question is then, what, if you know, is the concern of the law department in having these people fill out a statement of financial interest if they're already going to be subjected to background checks, maybe even have to fill out some paperwork for that?
Because the concern is that any information that they're going to have to supply for the Office of Inspector General or the Conflict of Interest Statement will not be public record in the way that filing a financial disclosure statement will be.
Okay, and you may not be aware that the courts have already ruled it's not an invasion of privacy, but that's something you probably aren't familiar with.
Well, I do actually know that it's not an invasion, that the courts have said that.
Okay.
Our concern is we're certainly fine with any actual people who are named to sit on the Board of Education filing financial disclosure statement. Our concern is the 18, let's just say if the group is 27, the 18 people who are not going to sit on the board who are going to have to disclose things about their income and their business interests on the form, that when they are not even going to be sitting on the Board of Education.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is Melanie DePalma.
Sure.
Ms. Madelman Kaplan, I'm just curious if these folks, these 27 folks who are on the list, and it is, by the way, called an educational nominating panel, so in my view, these are nominees for consideration, and I think that the statement of financial interest form, you mentioned it would be public information. Wouldn't that be part of the process for the public to maybe be able to determine whether they see any conflicts of interest for any of these candidates and maybe be able to speak up at public comment or however that would work, that they could speak up and identify something as an issue for one of these potential nominees.
That certainly is true, that they could do that. But my guess is that the people who are going to have comments already know these people very well and what their interests are. In fact, without knowing the names, I couldn't put a number on it, but I suspect that a number of these individuals already filed financial disclosure statements because they are on boards and commissions or serve in some other capacity that required them to file the state's financial disclosure form. But some of the other nominees that fit other slots, for example, parents may not have any familiarity with the financial disclosure statement requirement, other than the fact that Maya Nyack and I alerted the educational nominating panel about it, and there may have been, I don't know, people who were interested in seats on the board that were present at that public hearing.
Okay, thank you. And additionally, it's true, is it not true that the 27 names that will be sent to the mayor, from those 27 names, he must choose people solely from that list that's provided by the educational nominating panel. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, because he does have, if it says in the city charter, if the mayor wishes an additional list of names, he shall notify the panel within 10 days, and thereupon the panel has within 10 days to send an additional list of 3 qualified persons for each place to be filled. So potentially there could be another 27 names, and then the mayor within 20 days must make an appointment from either of those 2 lists. He can't then come back for a 3rd list or a 4th list. At the most, there would be 54 names submitted.
Thank you very much. That's all that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any other members of the commission have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's Commissioner Galloway again. I just want to clarify one point with Ms. Madeline Kaplan, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, Ms. Madeline Kaplan, thank you for walking through the process for what will happen after the names are publicly provided. I just want to make sure I understand what you described. Each of the individuals who is on the list will be subject to providing additional information to, I assume at this point, the mayor's office or the nominating committee for their consideration, some of which will be made public and some of which you said would not. And it's your understanding of that process that at that time, if that individual chooses to no longer participate from the time that they originally submitted their resume to this juncture, they can voluntarily remove themselves from the list. Is that your understanding?
That's correct.
Okay. And then with the statement of financial interest, this would be, if the commission goes in that direction of requiring the following, this would be one of other things that they're required to submit as a part of their consideration.
Pardon me?
Do I have that right?
Could you, I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
Sure. If the commission were of the opinion that individuals who are nominated, of these 27 individuals, have to submit statement of financial interest.
Yes.
As a part of their as a part of their being a nominee, it's your understanding that that would be one additional piece of what they're already going to be required to submit for further consideration.
Yes. If that's what the commission determines, they will submit those statements.
In addition to like conflict statements and other written.
In addition, well, the conflict statements, again, those are internal statements that will be provided to the Inspector General. I don't believe that any of the 27 have to submit any other public documents other than potentially the financial disclosure statement.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Anyone else have a question? Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Kaplan, and I appreciate you going over things and summarizing it very clearly for us. Mark, do you want to...
Do you want me to continue, or would any commissioner like to have any private deliberation?
I'm happy to obviously leave.
I don't know. I think we all understand the matter.
Okay.
And I'm not sure anyone else has a question. If not, Mark, are you prepared to make a motion?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed the facts and the relevant statutory provisions, and it's my view that the members of the Educational Nominating Panel and the members of the Board of Education are public officials subject to the Ethics Act and the regulations of this commission. The fact that these members, that the members of these governmental bodies are appointed by the city mayor satisfies the first portion of the Ethics Act definition of public official. As for the remainder of the definition, based upon the powers and duties of each governmental body as set forth in the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter, neither governmental body is a purely advisory board. It is further my view that the individuals who would be nominated by the Educational Nominating Panel for potential service on the Board of Education would be considered nominees as that term is defined by the Ethics Act and would be required to meet the filing deadlines applicable to nominees. And based upon my analysis and comments, I would like to make the following motion and move that the holding of this commission in this matter be as follows. Based upon the submitted facts, members of the Educational Nominating Panel and members of the Board of Education of the School District of Philadelphia are public officials subject to the Ethics Act and the regulations of the State Ethics Commission. And number two, individuals nominated by the Educational Nominating Panel for potential service on the Board of Education of the School District of Philadelphia would be considered nominees for purposes of filing statements of financial interest pursuant to the Ethics Act and would be required to meet the filing deadline applicable to nominees. That is, that deadline is at least 10 days prior to the mayor's selection of any of the proposed nominees.
A motion made by Mr. Corrigan. Can I have a second on the motion, please?
Second. Mr. Palmer, second.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any questions? On the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those
Aye.
against, vote no. All the ayes have it? That's it. Thank you, guys.